Great. So today, again, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Monica Tino. I'm a senior associate here at Luminary Labs, which is a strategy and innovation consultancy in New York. We have been engaged by the Department of Education to run the Future Finder Challenge. I'm also joined by my colleague Eden Baker, who will be facilitating the Q&A portion of today's session. The portion of this 1-hour session is to provide an opportunity for potential entrants to hear from experts about who adult learners are, what are their career navigation needs, and what are considerations for designing digital tools to support them. The discussion is not intended to focus on specific challenge details. We encourage you to reach out via the hello@futurefinderchallenge.com for any questions related to submission form or criteria. This is really to hear from these subject matter experts about adult learners and adult education. We'll start with introductions and that will be followed by a panel discussion, which incorporates questions from the Eventbrite. We'll then have about 15 minutes for live questions at the end. We'll be using the Q&A function in Zoom, and so feel free to submit questions during the presentation and we'll come back to them. And in case you missed at the beginning, we will be recording today's session and we'll be sharing it via the challenge website as well as the newsletter. So just before I pass it over to our panelists for introductions, I just wanted to say thank you again to our panelists for joining today. We're really, really excited to have them, and they have an incredible amount of knowledge to share today. We will do this in alphabetical order. So Eric, I'll start with you and we'll go from there.
Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to join you guys today. This is wonderful. My name is Eric Nessheim. I'm the interim managing director of North Star Digital Strategies. I'm the longtime executive director of Literacy Minnesota and stepped back this past year to focus entirely on digital equity. And we created a division around it called Digital Strategies, which oversees North Star Digital Literacy, which some of you have probably heard of, which is an online platform that assesses and offers skills training and so on around digital skills. So I'm excited. I come from an adult basic education background and ed tech background as well, and essentially a nonprofit that started a for-profit arm essentially around North Star. So I'm excited to share what I've learned through that. Can't wait to talk.
Well, good morning. My name is Hector Martinez. Thank you again for the invitation and be part of this panelist. It is great to be here. First of all, my position right now is I'm overseeing the adult education at the state of Kansas through the Kansas Board of Regents. I've been in adult education since 2000 when I moved to the United States. I have the fortunate to be, I believe, most of the roles in adult education from student to volunteer, teacher, coordinator, director of a program, local program, and now overseeing the state in Kansas. Then with my background on having going through different backgrounds on students and be able to have different grants through our local programs, I believe we can have a good conversation on how a career navigator has to be or it needs to be for adult learners. Thank you again for the invitation.
And hello, my name is Jen Vanek. I'm Director of Digital Learning and Research at the EdTech Center at World Ed. And thanks for the invitation to talk with you all. I'm excited about the challenge. My role, I think the part of my role that's most relevant is at the EdTech Center at World Ed. We've done field testing of learning technologies specifically designed to support adult learners. And then we've also done a whole channel of field testing on technologies not explicitly designed for adult learners in order to consult with developers to help them understand how implementation should be framed or the technologies themselves should be redeployed or redirected in order to better serve adult learners. Through all this research, I also craft technical assistance and professional learning for adult basic skills, adult literacy, adult ESOL educators in how to use technology and support digital literacy.
Great. Thanks so much. I will turn it over to our colleagues at Octave for quick introductions. I'll start with Grace. Or Travis, if you are available, I can start with you. Great.
Thanks, Monica. Thanks, Eric, Jen, and Hector for being here today and sharing your expertise and experiences with the attendees of this webinar. My name is Travis Combs. I'm the branch chief for the Innovations and Improvements team here in the Division of Adult Education and Literacy at Octave. Work closely with Eden and Jana and Monica and the entire team at Luminary Labs on the Future Finder Challenge. We worked with them on the Rethink Challenge last year, or for a couple of years prior to last year, and worked closely with Carolyn, who I will introduce next. Carolyn.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Lampola. I work on Travis's team in Octave and want to thank everyone for your interest in the Future Finder Challenge and for joining today, and for the panel for coming and sharing your expertise. And yeah, thanks to the Luminary Labs team, of course, for hosting and all your work on the challenge.
Thank you, everyone, for those introductions, and thank you again for joining. I will pass it over to Eden for our panel discussion.
Thanks so much, Monica. If anyone did not see me at the virtual information session, my name is Eden Baker, and I am an engagement manager here at Luminary Labs. Really thrilled to have you all here today. So before we open it up for a discussion with our panelists, I did want to address a few questions that we received via Eventbrite that are around the challenge itself. So the first question was really around the rationale for this project. And I think the Octave team did cover this at the information session, but just to recap quickly, we did get a few questions that are around, what are the gaps in the market and kind of why are we running this challenge? So what we essentially wanted to share here is we know there are a growing number of digital career navigation tools out there, but these are typically designed for established professionals and higher education students. So few of these are designed specifically for adult learners. And this does mean that many adult learners who are already often underserved do not have the support they need to enter and thrive in their careers. So with all of that in mind, the challenge really aims to spur the creation or improvement of tools specifically for adult learners. So this could be encouraging people to adapt tools for adult learners. For example, if you already had a product that was maybe serving higher education students and you wanted to sort of adjust the content and design for adult learners, that would be welcome. It also could be that you have an existing tool for adult learners, but you're looking to maybe improve a particular functionality or component of it, or you're looking to scale it. So really open to both new and established tools here. Through the challenge, we're also hoping to bring broader awareness to the importance of adult education and improving the career navigation experience more generally. Another question that we got via the Eventbrite, which I believe we've also received today, was around whether or not you can mark specific information in your submission as confidential. The answer is yes, absolutely. As per the rules, terms and conditions, each entrant must clearly delineate any confidential information in their submission. And this is, you can read more about this in the intellectual property provisions in the rules, terms and conditions. So I hope that's helpful information for a few folks who asked questions before today's session. As Monica said, the purpose of today is really to hear from the experts around sort of adult education more generally, as opposed to sort of addressing specific questions about the challenge. If you do have specific questions around the challenge, I would encourage you to send the challenge team an email or ask them today, and we'll get back to you after the session. So with all of that in mind, I wanted to dive into the panel discussion so that we can hear from the three experts we have here today. So the first question is sort of big picture. We know that the process of understanding and entering the workforce can be incredibly overwhelming and confusing, particularly for adult learners. So I wanted to hear from some of the panelists around what does a good career navigation experience, particularly for adult learners, look like? And Hector, I'm going to start with you for that one.
Thank you, Eden. Yes, I believe a good career navigator or navigation experience is that one that will include everyone. And I will refer this to probably a diversity, equity, and inclusion, to where every student feel comfortable using a tool related to what they are looking for and with the background that they will possess. We have students in the adult education that they have no skills or workforce skills in the United States coming through our system, and they need to be acclimated to that. We have professionals coming through our country that they're going through the adult education, and they may need a totally different, because they already went through a schooling system, that they have to have a different way to perceive the career continuing education, or how do they integrate themselves into the workforce. But most likely students, they're coming through a rough time and they are getting their high school diploma, or they're getting into the English as a second language and trying to find a way to acclimate into their communities. It is the whole handing, the things that we're doing in adult education now to help the students moving through different steps. That is the system that needs to be looking step by step with samples and putting face into where the student is going to go and progress to their near future. They need to see that goal. They need to see that pathway, and they're going to be able to see what the step is needed and how they accomplish that step to be moving forward.
That's really helpful context. Thank you, Hector. Eric, is there anything further you would add from sort of a digital skills perspective?
Yeah, thanks. That was a really good answer. I think that encompassed a lot of what we need to talk about. The only thing I would add is that I think often overlooked is the concept of digital skills, and there's lots of assumptions about that. And I think we found out over the last few years that you can't make assumptions about the skill levels of our workers and of people going through the job seeking process. In fact, as a literacy organization, I was surprised. I do some tutoring in one of our local labs, and I was surprised to find out that many of the people coming in to learn about digital literacy would actually have been considered fully literate, in normal times, and just didn't have those skills. And so I think it's a new concept maybe for some of our workforce systems to sort of see that as an issue. And I'm thinking that the easiest answer is just to do some screening alongside this, and then some potential skill building as well. So now, any app that's working on that, I think would be moving in the right direction.
It's interesting. I think that makes me think of accessibility and sort of considering digital skills and access to technology when thinking about designing a digital tool for adult learners, which I know we will get to a little later in the conversation. It's kind of building on what I shared at the beginning. We know that there are a lot of digital career navigation tools that do cater to higher education students and established professionals who are already sort of like well into their careers. But there aren't that many tools that cater specifically to adult learners. So with that in mind, what should entrants consider when designing a tool that is specifically for adult learners? Jen, we'll pass that to you, and then other panelists feel free to chime in.
Yeah, thank you. So I've just chatted a link to some key points that we advise technology developers on when it comes to creating tools for adult learners. We are funded by an entity called the Employment Technology Fund to field test a bunch of ed tech and other tech. And this is after nearly 2 years of research and understanding how the technology development trajectory had to shift according to what we were seeing. This is like the list of things you should definitely attend to. And I just want to call specific attention to the importance of whatever technology is developed of being really lightweight. It's got to be portable. It's got to work well on phones. It can't suck up all of the learners like data for the month just to log in once or twice. So if you really want a community of learners who we know to be smartphone dependent for access to Wi-Fi and access to the resources that are conveyed online, it's got to be super lightweight. It's also got to be super easy, like to onboard. 1 or 2 clicks to onboard to get started. And it can't, every time they log in, it's going to be like a huge barrier if the login and verification process is super cumbersome. And then once they get in, the interface needs to be super evident. Like it needs to be like the navigation needs to be clear. People have to know where to click. And then along with that, I think you need to make sure that you're developing media, like really rich and diverse media around for support materials that learners can easily link to, so that they have access to like a short video really quickly to see how something particular in the app or the affordance works. So that's like a short list. There's a longer list in the report that's chatted, but these are the things that we've learned over the years through our research.
And I will jump in here as well. And I think one of the things I concur what Jan said about videos, and I believe that for the first time ever, the tool needs to be started with a sample of what it looks like to be completed from 0 to the end. But also this needs to be flexible enough to mirror the needs of the adult education. If John is looking for information, the answer of the program needs to be John given the answers. Then they need to mirror that. And that's going to be a little hard to do, but with a little bit background of the user, they will know what is the background, their needs, and what is they're looking for, and the answers to handing that student through the process that needs to be occurred. And that could be created with an avatar, that could be created with some additional intelligence or programming in the background. Then that will be definitely something that will be revolutionary, the career navigation.
I have a few follow-up questions. One, Jen, you mentioned that it's really crucial that the onboarding process is, 1 or 2 clicks. Why do you think that's so important, and what else might people consider in terms of what a kind of optimal onboarding process would look like?
I think it's incredibly important to have an easy onboarding process, because learners might not see themselves as legitimate users of the technology or use of technology to accomplish the task. They might be tasks and things that they're used to, like handing their device to a more knowledgeable other next to them to like help them log on, help them get started, but they don't have agency in that process themselves unless they're able to get onto the app directly and with confidence when they need to use it. Every time they need help, every time they need somebody, it just diminishes their self-efficacy and doesn't really help build digital resilience in the other aspects of their lives. And hopping on a career path is something that would seem to require tons of agency and self-efficacy if you're going to feel confidence and feel engaged in it. The other thing that's really important, other than the like ready access to onboarding materials, like support materials, and not just like a PDF that lists steps, like click here with screenshots, like really media rich stuff that's videos that are annotated that show learners exactly where to click and when, is also there should be a human element to supporting onboarding. In our work with the XPRIZE Adult Literacy Communities Competition, we found that the apps that had the most success were being used in programs where there were things like onboarding parties, where learners would come together with a tutor or a volunteer or whomever, and they would actually like walk through getting on, practice getting on, asking questions, resolving things, and they literally did call it a party. And they would have pizza. So it was super fun and attractive, comfortable environment for them to feel confidence using the app so that they could then go on their way and make use of it independently.
I love that. I would use almost any tool if it involved a pizza party. And then in case folks missed it, Jen also just popped a follow-up message in the chat just about the importance of considering supporting multilingual resources. So Jen or others, I'm not sure if there's anything additional that you would want to add to that point.
No, just can't assume that everybody's comfortable all the time in English. And, you know, if it's, why not support to the extent that's possible, their communication in a language that can help them reach their goals.
And I think a lot of what we've started talking about it already does relate to our next question, which is around specific accessibility considerations. So kind of building on what you've all shared so far, is there anything you would add in terms of what entrants should consider in order to ensure that tools are accessible to adult learners? Jen, I'll throw that to you and then others chime in.
Yeah, at the risk of talking too much all at one time. I think that it's really critical to have to go to learners really early on in your design process, and not just learners who like are known to be really confident with technology, but to integrate learners who have like represent a range of skill and confidence using technologies, so that their perspectives can be embedded into design. And so when I say design, I mean not only the design of the actual technology, but design around the wraparound services and other supports that humans would provide as they're going through, you know, as they're making use of the tool. You need to take accessibility very seriously. So attend to any guidance given on, you know, at the federal, like from the federal resources that are provided around clear language and, you know, color contrast. Like really make sure that any accessibility tools that are possible to help the learners are possible, like they can use them within the environment you're creating. And yeah, I guess I'll leave it there. I think that's enough for now.
I'd like to make a comment on this, and I just wanted to refer back to the multilingual accessibility for this navigation. I think is critical, but also we need to take in consideration the market information system. We need to know that the market information system is embedded into the community needs, and the students are able to see that that is a need on the community, and they may be already working in some capacity on some of those areas, and they can be concentrated and feel comfortable enough to be able to utilize the tool. Then they can refer easily to this tool.
Thanks. And then building on what I believe Jen may have mentioned earlier, but in regards to kind of consideration of, you know, bandwidth and how much data a tool might suck up, is there anything further that entrants should be thinking about sort of early on in the design process to make sure that their tool does not require sort of anything flashy or a lot of data and would be sort of easily accessible on devices that adult learners often have?
I could talk from sort of a perspective of North Star, which isn't an app; it's a online platform. But we do go through a lot to make sure that it's accessible, and it's, you know, it is just a lot of work to do that, which is important. And then the other thing that I was thinking, as you know, as you're thinking about, and I see that we have some adult educators along with some maybe for-profit groups, think about the cost piece too a little bit, and not just for the adult learners, but for the programs that you might be working with. What's the affordability? What's the sustainability of it? And for sure, you know, cost on the ground is a no-no. Do not be charging learners for things. So find ways to make sure that programs can use it, and that programs and teachers and so on are buying into what the model looks like.
I think that's a really good point, Eric, about fees and not sort of wanting adult learners themselves to pay to access any of these tools. I think that's a really important accessibility consideration as well. Jen, I can see your hand is raised.
Yeah. I just wanted to add one more thing. So around technology, you know, there are some really wonderful examples of digital navigator programs in the world today. Eric's organization runs some. We're doing pilots and writing about digital navigator programs where learners have a need to use technology, they get access to that technology, and then they also get like a through line to the support and technical assistance and ongoing digital skills training to help them make use of that. So, you know, from a program perspective, if you're thinking about developing something that's more than just an app, pairing something like a technology-rich career pathways tool with a digital navigator program seems like it would be a really like winning combination. And you can just Google digital navigator programs and you'll come up with a lot of different examples.
Very good tip. Thank you, Jen. And building on what I think a few of you have shared already about the importance of getting input early on, do you have any recommendations on how entrants should go about seeking input from both adult learners, but also adult educators and maybe some other stakeholders that are involved in the adult education sort of ecosystem?
And I think the best approach to this is get to know your adult education providers. I think that the best input you can have it is to talk to your adult education providers and then reach out to organizations nationally for those that serve adult education programs. But it will be interesting for you to know if you go and visit one of your local programs and talk to directors or instructors and most likely students and just ask what you want to do next. And one of the major things I see it is students coming through adult education, they just need that help to be able to know the system. They most likely are out of the educational system, and that's what they are moving through those other options. Then my immediate response to that it is get connected to your local program, to the directors, instructors, and most important students. Get the feel from them.
Yeah, and I would just add that's exactly what I would have said as well. You know, we've been lucky to have a built-in literacy program with teachers and students that we can go directly to and have them, you know, work on experiments essentially around what we've been working on, which is, you know, exactly what you'd want, I think. But I would suspect that there's programs out there that would be happy to test things out and try things if you can, you know, link up with those programs, and that's how you get direct access to students. There are ways of doing it, and Jen would be better at sort of answering this, but there's ways of doing research around getting information from learners, and there's some groups out there doing that, finding out, you know, what's been going on during the pandemic, what are the needs, you know, what are the virtual needs, and so on. So there is information out there that you can access. Important to note that, you know, a lot of times it helps to offer a prize or to pay people to participate because they are helping you, and there's a lot going on in people's lives, both learners and practitioners.
That is such a good point, Eric. I think that's a really good thing for people to be mindful of when you're asking folks for their time and input. And I think, Jen, is that what you were also going to add with your hand raise there? Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good thing. Appreciate you highlighting that. And then I did want to go back, you know, Hector, you mentioned that it's really crucial to essentially, you know, find your local programs and essentially go and visit them and talk to instructors, talk to directors. I know this sounds a little bit silly, but like if someone really doesn't know where to start, how would you recommend they go about, I guess, firstly, finding local providers, and then two, reaching out to them? You know, can they pick up a phone? Can they send them an email? Like, what would you recommend in terms of like facilitating those early connections?
A couple of things I will direct them to. Just in a Google, they can search adult education, and they will come out with different places across the nation on state adult education programs, and they can connect even through the state to be directed to different programs, because it's going to be a totally different situation from rural communities to urban communities. And I think for a best field testing, it has to be connected to both. It has to be someone that it could be connected to a rural community and also the urban local programs. But the best way that is use your Google search and adult education or state adult education, you're going to be able to find the state agencies. Call them at any point and they will connect you to the local programs. The other great resource that I will say that the organization as a large is through the organization from COABE. Then you will have a lot of resources on COABE. Then this organization serves professionals in adult education directly, not necessarily a large of adult students. However, they will have some connections to adult local programs.
Great. So it sounds like start with trusty Google. I can see that Jen has popped a few links in the chat as well, including a link to AFLA funded providers. I'm assuming there's a list there. I haven't clicked through. And then also reminded folks to keep in mind the workforce boards in their area. And then if you didn't catch it, we can also pop a link to COABE, which is what Hector mentioned, the Coalition of Adult Basic Education. So that sounds like a few really great places to start. I'm mindful of time, and I do want to make sure we also get to a few of the questions that we have live. So we'll ask a few more that we received before today's session. If you do have a question in the audience, I encourage you to pop them in the Q&A window, and we'll come back to them in a moment. I should actually also take this opportunity in thinking about how to find adult ed providers to plug our challenge community. I think Monica's going to share a little bit more about that in a moment, but I know that it does have already quite a few people who have signed up from adult ed organizations that are interested in either teaming up with people or offering their expertise. So if you haven't already joined that, that's probably another great resource if you are looking to connect with adult ed providers. Okay, so I wanted to change track slightly and dig into sort of workforce data and needs a little bit more. So the first question here is, what different data sources would you recommend to effectively understand workforce needs in relation to adult learners? Again, if someone wasn't sure where to start, where would you suggest is a good point? Hector, I'll pass that to you, and then other panelists feel free to chime in.
I think one of the questions or a response that I wanted to start with it is, we need to understand the why adult learners are looking at adult education. And most likely is to better themselves economically. They like to have a better job, a better life, a better situation. Then with that in mind, we need to start looking into what is the data that we need to have as resources. First of all, we need to identify what is the adult education need, what is the numbers of participants in the state and the community and the nationwide about needing adult education services, English as a second language or high school equivalency diploma. Then with that, we need to be looking into what is the local marketing that is needing for those students or participants to be part of it. Type of jobs. What is the jobs that the students coming from adult education after receiving their high school equivalency or even learn English be able to perform? Salaries. What is the adult education salary that is going to be able to do and have that in openings? It is good to have the jobs, but also what is the openings saying on perspective for those students to be able to go through that. And also one important part and piece of this is across the nation, we are in adult education, we are implementing more and more pathways to career and integrated educational training service. Then how do we are collectively engaged with employers and how programs are delivering those services. And I believe all that data needs to be plugged into a system that a student is going to be able to recognize and be able to utilize that to move forward.
Thanks, Hector. And then I think on a related note, another thing that's come up a few times is just the impact of COVID. So we know that COVID has had a huge impact on workforce trends. So what advice would you give entrants looking to understand changing industry needs, but also changing education needs? Eric, I'll hand that one to you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that is exactly the $100,000 question, I guess. COVID has changed everything and sped everything up. And the economy changes have really made a huge difference too, so that, you know, everyone's scrambling to either hire people or move forward. One of the things that we're running into is some just really basic needs in the workplace that I think people maybe didn't expect. Some very basic things like people not knowing how to create passwords to get into the systems that they're working with. It's even pre some of the work that we've been doing with digital literacy assessment. So that's important to note that's the current economy that we're working with. And I think also important to note is that obviously things continually speed up with technology, but things are speeding up even faster than they have before. So whatever's being developed needs to be constantly adapted and updated to sort of approach the needs that are ongoing. So that's I think a very important piece to note for anyone working on developing something. And as we all know, virtually every job requires digital skills. That's what you're gonna hear from me every time. So.
Yep, I think it's worth reminding folks of that over and over, Eric. It's absolutely crucial and now more than ever, right?
And then I will just add one piece of this puzzle. And I know after COVID, the increase of enrollees to adult ed from 16 and 17 years of age, it is increasing across the nation. Then we need to be thinking about how can we implement a career navigation at the early stages when they are 16 or 17 years of age to be able to be placed into a job.
Really good point, Hector. And I think that might relate to one of the questions we've got in the Q&A, which we'll come back to in a moment. Okay, one or two final questions for the panelists, and then we'll jump into the live Q&A. So one thing we really wanted to focus on today is thinking about what outcomes of these tools might be and how entrants will assess them. So what data might entrants collect to measure whether their tool is effective? And how might they go about collecting this, including sort of incorporating some measurement into the tool itself? Jen, I'll hand that one to you.
Yeah, so I'm going to spin this question just a little bit, because I think that the data collection and understanding the potential impact of the tool actually has to happen during the design. So I would not suggest, you know, you'll do some research to understand your learners and do some building, but rather than like waiting for something to be complete in a design process, I think it's really important to allow for a sheltered usability and feasibility phase of the using the build, use, and redesign, so that, and during that phase, you're actually collecting qualitative data on the ways that learners think they should be using the app, and how whatever human is helping them can help them actually understand how to make it work better too. So don't wait until the very end. And then in terms of like ongoing, once an app is launched, once a program is launched and people are going, I think ongoing qualitative, I mean, everybody's gonna, the system is kind of set up to point people toward the long-term outcomes and the quantitative data. So yes, figure out ways to integrate that stuff in, but please don't neglect qualitative data that is maybe longitudinal, where you're checking in with learners many times over time to understand what their experience is within whatever system, process, pairing of human support with use of a technology. That has to happen in order for you to understand how the apps or the system is set up and how it's leading to some of the more quantitative outcomes-based data that you might be able to collect along the way too. Yeah, talk to people. It's so important when you're designing technology and systems to actually talk to people.
I've written that down as one of my big takeaways from today already, Jen. Talk to people, all the people, and early. They're sort of like my big learning so far. Okay, so as I said, mindful of time, before we open up for Q&A, I did want to ask each of the panelists if you could just share one tip for a potential entrant on something that they should really keep in mind as they're designing digital tools for adult learners. What would it be? Eric, I'm going to start with you, and then we'll go through with Jen and Hector.
Okay, 30 seconds. So I think it's important to remember, and some of you may be thinking about designing things specifically directly for adult learners. Some of you may be thinking of it for programs. So I think the point being, if you are working on developing something that will be used by programs, also be thinking about the people within those programs who would be using it, and facility of use for them, and sustainability for that program, and how they might use it. So those are all things that need to be thought about as you're doing this: cost, facility of use, adaptability, who pays for it, how sustainable is it?
Yeah, I would add that consider learners and talk to learners often. Make sure that you're designing a tool that aligns with what learners see their goals as being, so that they can see themselves playing an agentic role within whatever use of the technology or the process you've set up. So yeah, make sure you attend to learner goals and involve them early on in the process.
Well, I probably will add, make this personal. Do a personality analysis if you collect data to make sure you're meeting the needs of the learner. If you're going to go and buy a car, do you buy a car for your neighbors or you buy a car for you? Then that is going to be the system that it will talk to a student, and it will be related to a student to move forward and continue using the system.
I think that's such a good reminder, Hector, that when we're talking about adult learners, we're talking about people. And when we're talking about users, we're talking about people, right? And they each have, very different specific needs. And I think that, reinforces what you've all been saying about really seeking input early and often. Okay, so I did, as I said, want to start looking at some of the questions that folks have been asking during the conversation so far. The first one actually ties in very nicely to what Hector just mentioned, which is there a defined user persona or profile developed already? I did want to elaborate a little bit on a written response that we shared to this, just to really remind folks that when we're talking about adult learners, we are using a very specific definition from WIOA. That definition is in the rules, terms, and conditions, but just to kind of quickly recap, it is someone who has attained 16 years of age, is not enrolled or required to be enrolled in secondary school under state law, and is basic skills deficient, does not have a secondary school diploma or its recognized equivalent, and has not achieved an equivalent level of education, or is an English language learner. So I know that was a lot of information. Please take a look at the definition in the rules, terms, and conditions, just to make sure that you're sort of keeping that specific definition in mind when thinking about adult learners. And as I mentioned, that is taken from WIOA, the definition for eligible individual. And then just to build on that, in terms of the actual sort of group of adult learners, you are welcome to design a tool for all adult learners, or you're welcome to design a tool for a specific group of adult learners. So for example, that could be English language learners, or it could be veterans, just as long as you are demonstrating that your tool has been designed with the specific needs of adult learners in mind. And you'll see when you take a look at the submission form that it does ask for more information in terms of who your specific target users are and what their unique needs may be. Okay, I think you've had enough from me on that one. So I wanted to open up to the panel with some of the questions that we received from folks. So the first one is for Hector. So Hector has been mentioning this concept of hand holding a few times. Are you able to elaborate a little bit on what you mean by that, Hector? And I guess more specifically, what that might look like in sort of a digital context?
Yes, I believe from adult education, and we have adult education providers on the audience. It is just taking it step by step. We're not going to take anything from Gardner, and we're not going to be assuming anything from adult education learners. We have to take them step by step. And when I say whole handing, it is providing all the information possible for them to make a decision of what is their next step, because their life can change from one point to another and from one day to the next. And that's why we probably need to be consistent, engage them in possible assessment every day. This is kind of like what you want to do. This is your future that you see for yourself. And it is just taking and re-encourage them to continue with the path. It is, we need to have in our mind that adult learners change in their life. It is not as a regular high school student or college student. They have a life behind them, and they're trying to find a new way to survive. And that's why I was referring to whole handing, because they can drop the ball at any point.
I think that's such an important point, Hector. I know in a lot of early conversations we had as part of the design of this challenge, people really emphasize that the journey is absolutely not linear. And I think a phrase we heard a few times was often life gets in the way. So that might be, you know, financial things, it could be carrying responsibilities, but you know, the journey is absolutely not linear. So I think that's a good thing to reinforce. We have another question here, which is, what is the bigger issue, finding the right job opportunity or finding the right resources to prepare for an existing job opportunity? I'm going to open that up to the panel if people have thoughts. I don't know if you can prioritize one or the other. I'd be curious about any reactions to that question.
Can you say it again?
What is the bigger issue, finding the right job opportunity or finding the right resources to prepare for an existing job opportunity?
I will start, Eden. I believe most of the adult learners, they have some kind of skills, but it is going to be the resources. They need to identify the resources, and they need to identify how they're going to utilize those resources in their benefit. Job opportunities they may have already, and they may already have a job in themselves, but finding a new opportunities and finding resources to change a job, to identify themselves in what they want to do, I think it is the most important.
The reason I asked to have you repeat the question is because I don't think it's about the job, right? It's about getting established on a pathway of career development that is sequenced with work, training, credentialing, perhaps, and advancement, rather than jumping from, you know, frontline service job to frontline service job, you know, across different industry sectors. So I mean, yeah, it starts with a job, but it's not about the job. It's about something that's like more long-term, I think.
That's an interesting point. So kind of back to what we're talking about of seeing this as a journey, right? As opposed to necessarily just one point in time or one step. Interesting. There's a question here that I think is probably well suited to Eric, which is there a standardized assessment we can use to measure or estimate a learner's digital skills?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we found, and you know, again, we're a nonprofit organization. Years ago, a library system in St. Paul said, hey, is there a way that we can assess digital literacy skills in our community, because people are coming in looking for jobs we don't know. And so, you know, back then, Jen Vanek was actually working with us, and we looked around, couldn't find something, so we started developing something, and it became what it is, North Star Digital Literacy Assessment. There isn't a lot out there that assesses lower level digital literacy skills, so you know, in some ways, North Star is it. It offers an assessment on, you know, in 15 different categories, and curriculum and an online learning to go along with it. we're a nonprofit, but we do charge for larger systems to use it, but it's free to any learner who wants to use it. So there is something out there you might want to take a look at to see if it works for people, and for anyone developing something, to look and see what has worked in terms of making something sustainable out there. Because again, in our world, you create something and then if there's no more funding, it goes away, and that's really not what we want to be looking for here.
Great, thanks, Eric. And then in case people missed it, there's also a link to that in the chat if you want to take a look at that too. Okay, I think we've got maybe time for one more question. I know there are a few that we haven't had a chance to address live. So if you like, you're welcome to reach out to the challenge team. Otherwise, we can also post some additional information on the FAQs on the challenge website. So final question here, is it the panelists' understanding that adult learners actually understand what a career is as opposed to a job?
So can I just say, so in our 21st century learning ecosystem opportunities research that World Ed did with Portland State University, I would say the answer to the question is yes, because many of the migrant workers or immigrants, refugees that we were working with as participants in the study had come from careers. They were highly trained, they had skills, they had confidence in those skills, and they were not able to find a job that was aligned with that career here. So yes, I think they do. Many of them do. And it's actually up to us and the programs, and perhaps even like part of the tool that you all might be developing in order to unearth that stuff, to help create alignment with prior learning, knowledge, experience, credentials, and career opportunities here in the US.
Yeah, I will echo what Jen said. I believe we sometimes, I would like to say this out loud, that we stereotype adult learners and to be only English as second language or the GED students. And it's not only that, there is more than that. And those professionals coming, they already have a career and they may have 20, 30 years of experience, but there are difficulties in life that move them to United States. Now they try to begin their career again, or they're trying to find a new job. They're not finding another career. They're just trying to find a job to survive here in the States.
Hector, I think that is the perfect note to end on. And I think that aligns very nicely to a lot of what all the panelists have been really reinforcing today. So I hope that's something that all the attendees take away with them. I'm going to recap super quickly, I think, some of the big takeaways and then hand over to Monica to share a little more information on next steps. So I think a few big takeaways, at least for me, and panelists chime in, is that accessibility is crucial. Easy onboarding, low data, simple interfaces, free to use. Really think about all of those considerations from the very start of your design process. Engage potential users really early on, seek their feedback, but also be incredibly respectful of time. So consider, a stipend or some way to kind of reimburse them for their time that they are giving you. Same goes for adult ed providers, reach out to them early and often. There are a few great links in the chat for follow-up. AFLA and COABE sites are a great place to start there. And then same goes with data collection. Think about that early and often as well. Any final takeaways from the speakers before we wrap up? Okay. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Monica to just quickly remind folks of next steps. Just to echo Eden, just want to say thank you again to all the panelists. They provided some really incredible insights and great to see the questions flowing through. We wanted to remind people that the submissions are due on December 15th. That is 6 weeks away. To enter the challenge, you'll need to do all of the following by 6 p.m. Eastern Standard on December 15th of this year. You'll want to create a Luminary Lightbox account, and that's something that you can do through the submission form on the Future Finder website. We also encourage you to review the stage 1 selection criteria before submitting. And finally, of course, complete and submit the stage 1 submission form at futurefinderchallenge.com. We recommend that you complete all of these steps well ahead of the deadline to allow to resolve any potential technical issues or anything that may come up. We also wanted to plug the challenge community. There are several resources on our website. This is one of them. The challenge community is a great opportunity to connect with potential team members or offer your expertise. This screenshot is only a snippet of the growing challenge community. And as you can see, many people have already offered their expertise in areas such as adult education, career navigation, and ed tech. And so I really encourage you to sign up if you haven't already. And also, if you have, be sure to return to find potential partners. Collaboration, as hopefully you heard from these subject matter experts, is really crucial to creating a successful tool, whether it be with adult educators, adult learners, or workforce professionals. We also wanted to share the stage 1 resources. And this is a general resources page that contains a curated list of resources about adult learners, adult ed ecosystem, and career navigation. And a lot of these resources build upon the knowledge that was generated today. And there's also just additional resources on who adult learners are, and just many resources that can be of use. There also is a recording of the virtual information session that was in October. And so you can visit futurefinderchallenge.com/resources for more information. And lastly, just to sum it all up, we want to say thank you again to our panelists, and thank you everyone for joining today. If you have any additional questions, you can contact hello@futurefinderchallenge.com. We also encourage you to add hello@futurefinderchallenge.com to your address book to make sure that any messages aren't marked as spam. And lastly, we just encourage you to visit the website to sign up for the newsletter, join the challenge community, and look at additional resources. Thank you, everyone.